cher vieux Paris de mes amours, que c'est bon d'être de retour au printemps de ma vie. Bonjour Paris, tous mes chagrins, tous mes plaisirs, la symphonie des souvenirs surgissent de la nuit. La muette, ma chambrette, Saint-Lazare, ma guitare, la huchette, chansonnette, invalide, ventre vide. Sous les toits de tes vieux quartiers flottent des ombres bien-aimées du temps de mes folies. La Chapelle, oh Gisèle, la Villette, oh Claudette, la Bastille, douce Camille, République Dominique. Bonjour Paris, tu me fais revivre mes amours et retrouver pour quelques jours des frissons sans prix. Merci, merci Paris. Bonjour Paris, cher vieux Paris de mes amours, que c'est bon d'être de retour au printemps de ma vie. Bonjour Paris.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're still with you here on Nile TV International, and we just witnessed the closing session of the Summit for a New Global Financial Pact, which is being held in Paris under the auspices of the French President Emmanuel Macron, and with over 40 leaders in attendance, many from Africa, of course, topping them President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. We also have the Brazilian President and China's Prime Minister all gathered to give impetus to a new global financial agenda. We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by Mr. Raouf Gaafar, our political analyst. It's a very good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you, my dear.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Raouf. And let me start by asking you, how do you see the significance of this summit that is being held in Paris, the Summit for a New Global Financial Pact? What would you say is the main aim of this summit?
Well, it was about time to as you said in your words, to find a way to help ease the problems and the challenges that are facing Africa particularly, and the underdeveloped countries. And they have suffered from the different events that took place, and they are looking for help to develop themselves and to try and better their economy, etc., etc. And so far, there was no distinct mechanism established by which industrialized and developed countries could help the poorer countries. So this is why they are gathered in France, as you said, under the auspices of the French president, to try and find a way, a mechanism, long-term, to help the poor country, as I say, to withstand the challenges they are facing in a win-win situation, one way or the other.
Absolutely. Now, we've seen President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's address at the closing session of the summit for the new global financial pact in Paris. And in his address, he stressed the importance of developing countries' need to adopt creative ideas to face issues related to climate change, amongst other challenges, of course. And the president noted that Egypt is keen on carrying out many clean energy projects. And he also spoke about the cooperation with Germany in the project of the electric train, in the framework of sustainable development, as well as facing factors related to climate change using modern technology. Now, how do you see the president's address, and what would you say are some of the most important points that came in his address to the summit?
I mean, let's put Egypt aside. I mean, our president knows what he's doing, and he has an agenda to follow, and following a path for development, etc. But when he attends such an important meetings, he does not only lift the flag of Egypt, but
yes,
he is lifting the flag of all the
African nations. Yes,
of course, and that is why, as we know, the African countries are full of resources and natural resources and others. And one of the things that our president stressed upon was the maximum use or usage of such wealth, if I may say. So the resources are there. They needed to be exploited. They needed to be used. The countries, unfortunately, do not have the means. So it is time that the countries that have the means join hands with the countries that have the resources, and then try and make the maximum use of the resources. Taking into consideration that we're moving into clean energy, we're moving into green energy, and this has to be the motto. I mean, not simply using our resources, but to create a better world, a cleaner world, especially that the countries in Africa suffered most from the climatic changes and the abuse of fossil fuels, whereas they are the least participants in this. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Mr. Raouf, of course, President el-Sisi, as you said, he mentioned and spoke about what has been achieved during the last few years, and said, of course, it is not sufficient to support African countries in the face of climate change. And he emphasized that facing such a crisis doesn't just depend on developing countries, but is also related to the developed countries that need to, bear their part in the responsibility. How do you see this call? And this is not the first time that President el-Sisi has called for the participation of developed countries to abide by their pledges, to take serious measures to carry them out in the fight against issues related to climate change.
Well, I mean, he means, industrialized countries have to bear their responsibilities. I mean, they are responsible to a great extent to what is happening. So they have to participate, again, to a great extent in finding a solution for what is happening. So he is not asking them for charity, but he's asking them for a legitimate right to help. I mean, the poor countries have the legitimate right to be helped by the industrialized world who caused all the problems. So it is a responsibility, and mind you, it's a win-win situation. If it is done properly,
indeed,
everybody will benefit. So it is not really. But again, they spoke about maybe giving a holiday to some loans, or giving up some of the burdens, financial burdens on some of the countries. And if this is achieved, it will mark a big leap in the improvement of economies, etc. in the African countries.
Absolutely. And, you know, today the French president himself said that wealthy nations have finalized an overdue $100 billion climate finance pledge to developing countries and created a fund for biodiversity as well as the protection of forests. And one of the main outcomes of today's meeting was that multilateral development banks are expected as well to unlock an additional $200 billion in lending as well to developing nations. Would you say these are good, you know, outcomes of the summit?
Of course, of course. I mean, any positive step in this direction is considered very good. I hope this time the lending is with better terms, longer repayment terms, less or even zero interest. I mean, again, I repeat, it is a responsibility. It's not that they are helping, they must help. And I hope, I mean, 100 million here and another 100 million there, billion, I'm sorry, is a good beginning, but it has to continue. And this is the only way that everybody benefits. And mind you, in my humble opinion, the industrialized world will benefit more because they need the resources, they have the means to exploit it, they have the financial means to do the job, so they will help as well, but in the same time they will gain from this assistance and cooperation.
Absolutely. Mr. Raouf, now, to what extent do you see, you know, the summit contributing to creating and enabling environment for the private sector in the areas of sustainable infrastructure and financing small, medium enterprises as well as innovative financial tools? Because the private sector also has a role to play to meet the challenges facing some of the most vulnerable groups in developing countries.
NGOs and private sector are the major players in the development.
Indeed.
I mean, we cannot ask governments to
carry the burden alone.
Do everything, exactly.
Yes.
I mean, they can do infrastructure, they can pave the road, but in order to establish small, medium, and even large enterprises, it is the role of the private sector and NGOs in the same time to play this in the development of each and every country they are in. So, our president said it repeatedly that he is counting on the private sector to carry more than 70 or 80% of the development projects, etc. So this is, again, it's not charity, but it is a responsibility that NGOs and the private sector has. Maybe it is for the government, as I say, not only to pave the road and make the mega projects and prepare all infrastructures needed, but again, to inside the banks, to give loans and facilities to help everybody who wants to start a new business, enabling him to do that where he is. So it is an important player, the private sector, and as I said, everybody is counting on the private sector to play his role in the development of our country.
Absolutely. One final question, if I may, Mr. Raouf. Now, the president earlier met with his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, in a lunch banquet that the French president hosted at the Élysée Palace. And the presidential spokesperson said that Macron welcomed President Sisi, expressed his country's appreciation for deep relations binding Egypt and France on many levels, economically, politically, and culturally. How do you see the importance of such a visit in supporting and as well as strengthening cooperation between Egypt and France in many different arenas?
First of all, relation between the two heads of state is excellent.
Yes.
Number two, France has been always fascinated about the Egyptian heritage and Egyptian history. They love Egyptian people, and they have been one of the biggest cooperators and partners in the development of Egypt. We can have numerous projects in which France has and is still cooperating. So to keep the relation always at the highest possible level in excellent terms. It is excellent for the two sides, and I think that the president, before attending this important summit, he had a few meetings with heads of big, huge, I should say, French enterprises in order to promote their activities and investment in Egypt. So this is always very useful for the two countries.
Absolutely right. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Mr. Raouf Gaafar, our political analyst and our guest for this afternoon. Thank you very much, sir, for your time and your insight, for joining us this afternoon here on Now TV International. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for more coming your way later on Now TV International.